so I use my phone to look it up.
What do you think it is, Bill?
I like architecture.
I want to know
With it, toss it in the air, and ride along with it early in the morning. Why do you ride a skateboard, Johnny? Why do you ride a skateboard, Johnny? Why do you ride a skateboard, Johnny, early in the morning? I ride because it's quicker than walking. Riding on wheels is quicker than walking. I don't feel like doing much walking early in the morning.
Wow, thanks everybody. What a welcome. Tony Hawk. Before we get started, I wanted to give you a little backstory on this title of this mini tour that we're doing, Dark Slides and Secret Tapes. Kind of metaphors. Dark Slides is a metaphor for, well, basically tricks that we once considered impossible, in fact, tricks that are called impossibles, that I like to give Rodney so much credit for, and including the dark slide. And secret tapes refers to, you know, those kind of hacks and hidden advantages you find along the way so that you can complete the next level of life. And also, it's just a pander to THPS fans. So, thank you. So, we get started here. My name is Tony Hawk. I grew up in San Diego, California. And I grew up in the 70s. I grew up in the 70s, kind of like a normal 70s California childhood. A lot of baseball, basketball. I wasn't very good at either one. But I was steeped in the surf culture because it was Southern California. It was the 1970s, and skateboarding was an extension of that surf culture. My brother was an avid surfer, and so he skated by default because it was literally called sidewalk surfing then. He ended up getting me my first skateboard, and I honestly thought it was a cool way of transportation. I didn't think of it as some road to success or even considered tricks on it. I just loved the feeling of riding it around instead of the bike. In fact, I had a paper route, and I would ride my skateboard on the paper route instead of on a bike, but it sucks carrying that bag, and that's a long story. But eventually got to go to the skate park for the first time. The skate park in San Diego was called Oasis. It was a bunch of empty swimming pools. And when I went to Oasis the first time and I saw people literally flying out of swimming pools, I had an epiphany. I was maybe 10 years old, and I was like, I want to do that. I want to do whatever it takes to do that. And every time I went and skated, I stayed there for hours. And every time I went, I got a little bit better. It was the only time I could incrementally judge that I was actually improving at something. Not baseball, not basketball, but every time I skated and And I told my dad one time when he was driving me home, I said, you know what, I feel like that was my best day at the skate park. And he said, I hear you say that a lot. I go, well, that's because it was better than the last time. I'm getting better at this. And I think he could tell that I truly loved it like nothing else. And I really wanted to learn how to do those aerials that I saw other people doing, and then magazines, Glenn Friedman photos. I just couldn't get the height, but I figured out little ways to maneuver my board. And I saw Eric Grisham doing a varial, which he did frontside. He grabbed his board, he twisted under his feet. My frontside air sucked. There was no way I was going to do frontside varial. But I knew how to do backside airs, and I knew how to grab my board in a way that I could spin it. And I eventually learned how to do backside varials about halfway up. It's a brown tile bowl in Oasis, which no one ever skated, and I liked it that way because no one could make fun of me. And I finally did a varial about halfway up the wall to no audience and to no appreciation. Not that I expected it, but the feeling of validation that I got and the buzz that came after it is the dragon I've been chasing ever since.
So very similar. I was, I think, 9 surfer culture, but Florida version of it. Just sort of, just throwing it down the street. Yeah.
Yeah. Woo! Godfather!
Oh, this is so awesome to me.
Tony doesn't.
I can kickflip!
No, you yell, Rodney, invent a kickflip. That's what you say to him.
I was skating late the other night, like 3 in the morning. Cops roll up to me like hauling ass like you're in trouble in the middle of the night. And they stop partners in Hawthorne, LA, and they're like, do a kickflip. Anyway, back to the He was like, hey, check out my board. I rolled on it, seriously, no more than 5 minutes. And I'm saying the sky opened up, and it was like, that felt good. Cruise home, asked my dad, my folks, hey, I'll do whatever it takes. I'd love to get a skateboard. And my father, stern man, he's a squadron leader to drop the atomic bomb. Leave a million people killed, he's the guy. And one of his favorite expressions was,
Too soon.
not no, but hell no, which he gave me with vigor, right? Told me I'd be a bum if I did it. And so basically I just took it, walked away. But at that stage, for the next months, maybe 6 months, 5 months, I more or less smuggled in magazines. It's like contraband. And I fall asleep to these images seared in my head. Finally, I think my mom got the picture. She's this quiet woman. New Year's Eve came. We were headed down for dinner, had a couple of drinks. I love my family. She just gave me a nod. Now's the time. If you want to ask again, this is your shot. And I did. Edge of pleading, but, dignity. And he looked at me and he assessed. It was different. He was like, all right, half dozen stipulations on what would trigger me quitting. And the next was, he goes, but listen to me. You're a good athlete, you should be playing golf. You are going to be like that short kid who plays basketball night and day across the street. And then be good for it. Fine, thank you. I took it with grace before he changed his mind. I go upstairs and I remember from my window, I can see catty corner where the lit basketball hoop was in Greg's house. And I remember looking down, and again, man, it wasn't like sky lit up, but it was that sense, took a knee that I'll remember this day, So next month's pass, just kicking around again, no skate parks, nothing great going on, just, the porch. But finding back then handstands, 360s, slaloms, it was terrible back then. But I remember 1 1/4, 1 1/2 360s, 1 3/4. It took me months just to get to 2 3/4, 3 1/4, and then one day, 9. Next day, 15. At that stage, it's on.
Yeah. Yeah.
So utmost stipulation. First time you get hurt, like doctor's got to put you together again, quit. Which was later on, a couple years later, we had a park, Florida rains, midsummer. See, it rains like crazy for an hour or so, then it dries up pretty quick, and I was impatient skating, whipped out straight to my face. Oh my gosh, lost my tooth. Bleeds so much out the face, right? And we lived in the country at that stage, so I called my father. I'm like, Dad, I'm so sorry, I got hurt. Come get me. I remember it took about 25, 30 minutes for him to get there, and he pulled up, and very much, again, the way he's raised me. He stopped at a distance, he looked at me, and I come out and I start crying. He's like, what are you crying for? Please don't make me quit. And at that stage, again, I think it registered that, this is not all bad, this thing. He's like, you can keep going, we'll fix you. That was like an understanding. That was a change for us.
And my first injury was very similar, but a different outcome with my parents. I was skating the brown tile ball, brown tile ball at Oasis, and I'm pretty sure I hung up on a rock and roll. I don't remember quite right, but I was riding a giant Sims Andrecht board. It's probably 10 inches wide, almost as tall as me. My foot is half the size of the width of the grip tape, and I think I'd learned rock and roll. I was pretty sure I could do them. And then next thing I know, I'm waking up in the pro shop with my eyebrows split open and my teeth missing, and them telling me that someone found me because no one's skating the brown tile. So someone found me in the middle of the bottom of the bowl and brought me up to the pro shop. And my parents were at work. I got an ambulance, and I had an epiphany in the ambulance, and usually you would think the epiphany is, holy shit, what have I done? I can never do this again, my parents are gonna kill me. My epiphany was, I gotta learn how to do rock and rolls better. And I knew in that moment that this is what I was gonna keep doing for as long as possible. And when my parents found out, they weren't mad, they weren't threatening to make me quit. They were just happy that I found something that captivated my attention instead of bugging them all the time for rides to the arcade. And my dad made me throw away my flyaway, old school people, you know what I'm talking about, and get a Pro-Tech. Not that it was that much safer, but it looked safer. But it was the 70s, you rang your bell, get back out there. And I just knew in that moment that I was not gonna quit. But a side note for our injuries, best thing about knocking your teeth out is that you get to pick the size and the color of the next one. Which I did many times. If something's been done, it's so much easier to learn than if it's never been done before. If someone else has made it, then you just, in your head, it's possible you can do it. It's all convincing yourself. Every trick that I'd never done before was a matter of telling myself, you are capable of doing this is possible, go do it.
Tony and Rodney were both outsiders from the beginning.
Yeah.
And for a long time, what they were doing was considered odd. They would do it, you would bring your friends to come to the park, see what Tony's doing. Hey, we're going to come out behind the building and show you what Rodney's doing. And they would go look at that and they go, oh, it's like a freak show.
So as kids, I think 12 or 13, whatever it was, Stacy called, both of us got put on the Bones Brigade when we were young. All of us were chosen because, we had some skills, but it was more because we had this common mindset that once banded together, a whole new normal took hold. It was anything but that. I think the coolest thing about it, especially like getting to know them at first, like being next to Stevie when Stevie was on freestyle, it's like you are surrounded by these dudes that are pushing the horizon, pushing back the horizon of what was possible. I think more importantly, they were kind of cracking realms of what was considered impossible. I think like kickflips have been done for a long time, and I remember it was like, hey, going end over end, it takes too long. So people called it impossible. very frankly, I still remember it was a rainy day, just rolling my board around my foot. Next thing I know, I could do impossibles. And it was as soon as I started to do them, showed them, next thing I know, other people started doing harder variations, just kept coming. Which is the beautiful thing about skating, man. We were able to push things out that early day and then see others pushing the limits for us that have different skill sets that drove us further. Together, we pushed us further than we ever would have gone as individuals. I think the other thing I would share is, at first I remember reading about Bones Brigade, like Alan Gelfand would come to the park with Gil, being in Florida, and I would trip out like, oh my God, that's what a real pro looks like, Bones Brigade. It was untouchable. And then you get that call, flying out west, Stacy picking me up, I knew his voice, whatever it was, that triggered like, oh my God, that's Stacy Peralta, what does he see in me? And then you start to get in there amongst the team, and then you realize everyone's got these crazy superpowers, X-Men style, you know, with eccentricities. And you think, I found my place in this, and it becomes like what motivates you most is just the dudes next to you. And of all of them, especially when I go down for those Del Mar contests and staying with Tony, Tony is the one that drove me more than anybody.
And that's exactly how I felt about him. Whenever I would learn a new trick, the first person I wanted to tell about it and bounce off it is Rodney. And I would watch him create these moves, these foundational tricks, tricks that we just take for granted that are in our vernacular now. And he was doing it all alone with no peers, no real inspiration from anywhere else except for his own mind. And I identified with that greatly because I felt like I was doing tricks that no one really appreciated or cared about, but I loved doing them. And so we fed a lot off each other in those days. And we, so much that, for instance, I learned fin flip airs because I was watching him do finger flips every which way on the flat with his board. I thought, what if you could do that in the air and catch it again? And that was it. When I did it, it was kind of a joke. I was like, look, I'm Rodney. Wait, I caught it. And then eventually I figured it out. And then the reciprocation was I learned air walks just because I was doing one-footed airs and I took my other foot off, and this guy does it on the flat. And it was just fascinating to see that push and pull and how we were inspiring each other. We had no idea where it was going or what we were creating, but it was the most fun. And in those days, since I was a pool skater, you were either a freestyle skater or you were a pool skater. That was it. There was no street, there was no park. There were parks, but those are pools. And I didn't have the build or the strength to really get airs in the traditional way. And that was why I started skating. Like, that's why I fell in love with skating, because I saw people flying. And I was like, how do I get to fly? And I could do little airs. I did little nose grab airs because I did Algera. And I could do little backside ollies, so I could kind of get out of the bowl. But if I were to actually reach down and grab my board, all my speed was killed. And I remember one day in Del Mar, it was late, the park was about to close. I'm pretty sure there was a competition in town because there were a lot of freestylers there. And I started to think, maybe I can grab my board at the peak of an air, then I don't have to reach down for it and kill the speed. And I started trying basically ollie to Indy airs. And I was trying to catch it right at the peak of the air, and my feet kept coming off, and eventually I tried a little bit lower, and I finally caught one, and didn't make it, but then I saw two freestylers come over to watch, because they could tell I was working on something, and apparently they thought it was something innovative, and it was Rodney and Steve Rocco. This is true. And so I'm trying this thing, and I'm like, oh, now I got an audience. And then I finally made one, and this picture right here in the middle, that was taken probably within days of me learning it. And my feet were definitely hanging off like that. I was barely keeping them on, but I made it. And I was stoked just because, for me, it was just a desperate move to get to do airs. I didn't think I was creating some movement in any way, or that it was going to inspire anyone else to try it. It was just like, yes, I can do Indy airs without squatting down and lifting it up and yanking it. And Rocco, in a very off-brand move, gave me a compliment. And he said, that's the future of Eris. And I was like, yeah, right. It's the future of Eris. Like, that's the future of my Eris, because I'm so small. But at the same time, I wasn't trying to affect change. I was just desperate.
Rodney Mullen inventing the flatland ollie would change everything.
And it was interesting because even though he did that trick, very few people did it for a long time.
When that happened, we didn't think, oh yeah, that's going to be a trick. It's going to set the precedent of skateboarding for generations to come.
I mean, it really started changing the landscape of skateboarding, going away from being all based on vert, really, to really taking it into the streets and putting it in the hands of every kid.
It's just an example how just a simple innovation in one corner brought so much change to the rest. Honestly, like I've been doing the basic movements always. It was just a little transfer trick, freestyle for years. One day I saw Alan Gelfand come to the skate park, 4 feet of verts, snapped an ollie, and I remember like, oh my god, I could do that. I'm flat. Go home. It was Sunday night, weekend stuff. Monday, school all day. As soon as I got home, it's just a seesaw motion. That's what all it is. It's just jump once you get the seesaw motion. So by the time it was dark that night, Monday, I could do them a foot higher. So, and even then, no one really cared for a long time, just like Glenn said, because it wasn't useful until skating really emerged. I think it's the same for a lot of like inventions. It's one thing to invent something. It's another thing to have it be useful, have it really adopted for an innovation. I think if there's something too that, like Tony says, you don't know what you're doing that has significance. Like Ollie, was that going to have significance compared to all the freestyle tricks that no one knows, like they're extinct, that are gone, that I thought were meaningful at the time? Which really rearranges your thinking of like, hey man, forget about like legacy or all that stuff. Just focus in the moment, just love what you're doing and take from other people. You never know what's already in you. A little nudge, it can change the rest. So that was what I took from that. So I think at this stage, like how do you do there are so many great skaters out there who can pretty much do whatever they see with perfect textbook precision. It's just rare to find people who can do what's ever been seen. And it begs this question of creativity. And what's clear enough to me after so long of it, it's so many people have good ideas, but the people who are tagged with, oh, you're so creative, they have certain skill sets for manifesting ideas. Like one of them for me in particular is like navigating, if something's never been done, it's like this image where you see this vase at first, and then in the negative space you start to see the faces looking at it. Likewise, when you don't know what to do, you're tinkering around with ideas and learning from your mistakes until what starts to manifest is the trick itself. That's one of those sort of skill sets. The others would be, I think, like, I don't know if you've ever picked a lock, it's so gratifying. If there's something that's so good to learn, it's like that's what skating is. It's like lock picking, where you get basic physics in your head of like ideas and mechanisms. But beyond that, you just listen and feel the movements of where they're going. The last I would say, and again, I touched on this with Bones Brigade, again, like you're labeled as creative. I'm like, I'm not sure that I'm really creative, but I love lock picking. You know? And it's this idea of belief. And belief is almost like this corny thing of like, oh yeah, you believe, right? Or visualize. Like, yeah, I don't know it works like that. But there is. Like 4 Minute Mile is a classic example, right? Where all the best dudes, happens with us all the time, 900 especially. All the best skaters from around the world are striving after one particular goal. One finally lands it, puts it out there, And then suddenly random people start doing it, and they're not necessarily the dudes you'd expect.
10-year-olds.
It's not necessarily technique or whatever, but it's the belief that you can do what's never been done. Like with that kind of power to manifest it. And that's just, that kind of belief is rarer than talent. And when you have them both in that like degree, X-Men style, you get like him.
Yeah, well, I was picking a lot of locks in those days and opening doors to no one watching or caring a whole lot. But I love doing it. Same thing, just tinkering around and trying these new tricks and trying variations or take a foot off and then spin that and take a foot off. And I was getting a little bit frustrated, not in a way that I was going to quit or anything, but I was wondering, like, why doesn't he want to do these tricks? I don't think any of them are that hard or interestingly hard. Are they just too weird? Are they just too, like, are they truly too circus freakish? I just didn't understand why, but, you know, I felt like I wanted to have a trick that would resonate, maybe just to be in the vernacular, I feel like I was in the fold of skating. And I remember talking to Lester Kasai one day. This was 1986, and I told him, I go, man, I'm trying to do these tricks, and no one wants to learn my tricks. You know, like, got the big twist, and we got this, and Andrex, and he's like, well, you know, maybe you got to work on names. Because we were going crazy with names back then. It's basically like you invent a trick, name it, whatever. And that's why we have all these insane names, skateboarding. But I had just learned. I was doing lean to tails, and lean to tails back then was a trick you would do in a pool in a run that was in place of a kick turn. It was like not a kick. The idea of a run back then was you don't want to do any kick turns, and so I would do lean to tails just to kind of get reset. And it was like good enough. But then I started exploring taking my feet off. So I took my foot off on lean to tail, and I liked the way it felt. I had just learned it, and it felt like one fluid motion. I started getting a little bit higher, and I told, and Lester said, what about that 1 foot lean to tail? And I was like, yeah, everyone wants to learn it. He's like, you got to name it something trendy. And 1984, and the original Material Girl is the trendiest thing that is in the public sphere. So he said, call it the Madonna. And I guess it worked, because you guys seem to know what that is. And I was stoked. That like finally something stuck. And I even saw some of my peers and my competitors do it in their runs. And I mean, when we're talking about it here, that was in 1984. 40 years later, and I'm quite certain you're going to see a few Madonnas at the Olympics in Paris. So.
And that's when the rumors flew that he was practicing 9 hours a day. You're going, 9 hours a day? How's that possible?
When we would go on tour, even 2 in the morning, we'd, arrive at the hotel. I'm going skating.
So that was pretty much the height of freestyle in that neighborhood, right? And by that time, I had all my dreams. This full throttle Bones Brigade, we were touring all over the place, pro model, like stuff I never had the courage to dream. It was with the best skaters that, like the people I admired most. At the same time, contest after contest winning, it was starting to weigh a little bit. There's a lot of expectation that, hey, if you fall, if you lose, if you get second, well, that's really losing. And in hindsight perspective, it put me in the perspective of I'm skating these things just so I won't lose, because I'm afraid of losing credibility from the team, afraid of what they might think about me. And all this drilling for consistency militated against my progress. I was advancing, which was kind of expropriating. It was taking away the first love of why I left skating to begin with, is just making up stuff and doing our thing, just to express ourselves. So as it started to weigh a little bit more, I started to not feel the same joy. Again, this idea of what originally motivates you, that will change, especially if you start getting paid for it over time. You make it a profession, it will change out from under you, and it can extinguish the fires that propels you. And I felt that. So I remember, of all people, this is Aristotle, but recently I heard this rapper say it better. It's like, everything you need to hear has already been said. Often it's not great words of wisdom, but if you know this ethos, pathos, logos, right? It's the sense of this person has to speak in a voice that connects with you because he's walked in the same shoes. And of all people, it was Tony. So I remember calling, like, dude, I don't even know what to do.
I wasn't as far along in my frustration with competition or losing interest in it. So I was just trying to be supportive from a supportive friend. And I said, yeah, Rodney, don't worry about it. You already won everything. Like, take some chances.